hopefully we can get that technical issue fixed. But in the meantime, Vice Chair, you can officially start the meeting whenever you like.
All right, let's start the meeting.
Okay.
Start first with the land acknowledgement.
Usually we start with roll call first.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, it's okay.
Well,
Okay. Hopefully Member Bierce can hear. Member Bierce, if you can hear us, could you please?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm here on Zoom per AB 2449 for medical reasons. Thank you for the flexibility here, and I'll be joining by Zoom tonight's meeting, and might have another caregiver join the room at some point tonight as well, but right now it's just me in the room.
Thank you very much. Okay. Member Fasoon? Here. Member Hodges?
here.
Chair Hill McClanahan is absent for the moment, but we expect her later tonight. Member Larson?
Here.
Member Lieberman?
Here.
Member Melgen?
Here.
Okay.
Lead to the land acknowledgement. All right. City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lijon. Acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to the indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. All right. Move on to approval of the minutes. A motion to approve.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay. Member Bierce?
Yes.
Member Fasoon?
Yes.
Member Hodges?
Yes.
Member Larson?
Yes.
Member Lieberman?
Yes.
Member Melgen?
Yes.
Minutes approved.
All right. We'll move on to public comment. Items not on the agenda.
So we'll start with members in the room. Yes, if you want to go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jack Kinney, and I'm here representing the Albany Rotary Club, and specifically the Environment Committee. And I don't know if you're all familiar with Rotary, but it's one of the largest service clubs in the world, has over 1.4 million members, and is established in 1925. The Albany Club was established in 1929. The International sets goals for all the clubs around the world, and one of the ones that they established in 2018 was an area of focus on environmental protection. There's other things like fighting polio and getting clean water, but that's one of the newest ones. So our club here in Albany has taken on that lead from the International, and we've formed our own Environment Committee. And so I just want to introduce us and myself, and we'll be asking to partner with groups like yourselves and the city to do projects or whatever. We want to educate ourselves and our members about some of the issues on the environment and on climate action. So we look forward to having some of you maybe as speakers. Some of you have been speakers, I think, at Albany Rotary. I know Catherine Bierce was there recently making a presentation. So we want to reach out to you and make that connection. We're going to be compiling information for our members, and hopefully have a lot of cooperative efforts together. Thank you.
Lucinda Young, please go ahead.
Good evening. This is Lucinda Young. I wanted to first really thank the new Sparks Fellow for coming to visit the Albany Climate Action Coalition table at the Bon Marché event a couple weekends ago. It was really great. He took a lot of time to familiarize himself with the materials and to find out what Albany Climate Action Coalition is doing. And we really appreciated, the whole group really appreciated his presence at that. And also, I know that Bon Marché was not a City of Albany event, but it was really a great coming together of sustainability resources. And there was a repair clinic there, a group of KALB students who were actually repairing clothes. There was it's called Nimble, a business that actually repairs appliances. And I would love to see our city support Bon Marché. I think they're going to hopefully have them at least annually. And I would love to see the city play some role in that. Thank you.
We have no more public comment.
All right. I will move on to announcements.
Okay, our first announcement, as you probably have already seen, is Benji Willett, who is our new Civic Spark Fellow. We're very excited to have him with us. He's going to be taking over a lot of the tasks that Sutton was working on when he left, in particular implementation of our new foodware ordinance, as well as the street tree management plan, in addition to all kinds of other projects like our Civic Spark Fellows always work on. So we're very excited to have him. I'll let him introduce himself briefly.
Hi, lovely to meet you all. Like Michelle said, I'm the new Civic Spark Fellow. Very, very excited to be here in the city of Albany working on these projects, and then also hoping to learn about other project opportunities and get closer to specific actions having to do with environmental decisions. So thank you for having me, and I'm thrilled to be here.
A few other announcements for today. Very exciting news, the HERA program, or HEEHRA. This is the very large rebate program for electrification that was passed in the Inflation Reduction Act, has finally launched in California after a few years of waiting for it. It has launched for multifamily buildings specifically, and we're expecting the single-family program launch in the next couple of weeks. They haven't given us a specific date for that, but it is very exciting, and it means there's a lot more money available for multifamily buildings to, do energy efficiency and electrification work. So we're working on learning exactly all the details of the program and doing outreach to our multifamily buildings about that. We also just had a compost giveaway this past weekend and gave away, I think, a record number of bags of compost. It was 800 plus. So that was a big success. The first year that we've done 2 compost giveaways in a year. And speaking of compost, we of course still have our compost hub open every Sunday. And coming up on October 27th, the Gill Tract Farm will also be hosting a harvest festival that has a whole variety of activities, but they often include the compost hub and some compost education in that event as well. And it's always lots of fun. So those are my announcements for this week. If any other committee members have announcements, please go ahead.
Hearing none.
We can do public comment on announcements, although we don't always get them. But
Okay, sure. Let's go to public comment on announcements.
okay, I'm not seeing any hands.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, never mind. We got one.
And Young, go ahead.
Yes, this is more of a question for Michelle, and I know that sometimes you can answer questions and sometimes you can't. But on the HERA rebates, have we gotten any sense as to how long? I know it's a pot of money and it's available until it's drawn on, but do we have any sense as to, how many months these funds are going to be available? That's my comment, my question. Thanks.
Thanks, Lucinda. I don't know the answer to that. I don't think anyone really does. It is a limited amount of money, but I think it really just depends on how many people take part in the program and what specific projects they do. So I think it's pretty uncertain at this time.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to presentations, where the first item is the active transportation plan update.
Okay.
I have my caregiver here in the room with me, so she'll be out in a sec.
Thank you. Just a moment, I'm going to share my screen for this presentation. Okay. And I'll introduce Ben Matlaw, who is our transportation planner. I'm not sure if he's come to this committee before.
I have not.
Okay, well, everyone, I'd like to introduce you to Ben. He's been doing lots of great work for us for the past 8 or 9 months. And in particular, he has been working on the update to our active transportation plan, and that's what he'll be talking to us all about tonight.
Thank you, Michelle, and greetings, Climate Action Committee. Nice to meet you all in person. Yes, so we are here tonight just to share a little bit about the active transportation plan process and timeline over the next 12 to 15 months. The active transportation plan is, next slide, is a new plan. The 2012 active transportation plan is the most recent active transportation plan. So this is a new active transportation plan after 12 years of relative dormancy. There were 2 updates in between 2012 and now of the 2012 plan, but this is a brand new active transportation plan, and you can imagine how much has changed in the active transportation world over the past 12 years. So we're excited to kick this off with the public. You know, we have ambitious walk and bike mode share goals in our climate action and adaptation plan, and so this plan is expected to help us meet those goals. I think in particular there is a goal of 25% reduction vehicle miles traveled by 2045. So this plan seeks to complement in many ways the climate action and adaptation plan. Next slide, please. So this is just a little bit of a timeline of active transportation and street safety related plans that have existed over the years in the city of Albany. We started off in 1997 with a traffic management plan, which dealt a lot more with traffic safety than active transportation. As I mentioned, the 2012 active transportation plan, and all the way up until today. You know, there was a busy year in 2019 for active transportation related plans, including the climate action and adaptation plan and the Solano Avenue Streets plan, a complete streets study. And we are now moving into a new phase of active transportation in the city. Next slide, please. So the 2024 or 2025 active transportation plan is going to be kind of broken down into 3 phases. We are currently in our first phase, that is the vision and goals and existing conditions phase. So right now we're in the process of, we've got a draft set of goals and kind of vision for the active transportation plan it's on our website that we'll share with you in a minute, and just a bunch of maps and details about existing conditions on the ground, including pedestrian injuries over the past 10 years, bicycle injuries over the past 10 years, to help us inform how we might change the streets moving forward in the city. We are actively seeking public feedback on this plan right now, which I will share with you in a minute. But for each of these phases, we are having a public feedback, public input, and engagement component to the phases. So the next phase, which will happen sometime in the spring, will be on facilities and policies. This is kind of like the meaty stuff that everyone gets into. You know, what specifically the streets might look like in the future, and the policies that might inform those decisions. And then the third phase, which will probably happen closer to the summer, is kind of prioritization of those changes. So next slide, please. So for each phase, there's kind of 5 overarching public outreach components to the phases. The first is a group that we've coalesced called the Technical Advisory Committee. This is kind of a group of folks from various cities around Albany, so City of Berkeley, City of Richmond, City of El Cerrito, the Alameda County Transportation Commission, Metropolitan Transportation Commission, as well as some other departments within the city, such as the fire department and police department. And they're kind of advising us on just making sure that we're not, we're dotting all our I's and crossing all our T's as we move this plan forward. Then we're doing public workshops for each phase. We have one coming up, which I'll talk about in a second. We have targeted meetings and opportunities with relevant groups, current company included. The Transportation Commission is going to be involved in each phase, as is the City Council. So those are kind of the 5 touch points that we have with the outside world as we develop this plan. Next slide, please. This is a little, just an easier, hopefully, kind of schedule or timeline to digest. It's a Gantt chart. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Gantt charts. And this is just kind of pinpointing some of those meetings and touch points that I just mentioned, and kind of breaking down the overarching pieces of the plan. This is, a little bit of the breakdown, and the green, as you can see, is kind of where we're involving folks in the plan and what that looks like. Next slide, please. So what have we been up to thus far? We actually kicked the project off in July, but we've been doing a lot of reviewing of previous plans, developing existing conditions and facilities maps, creating the website, and planning meetings since then. We met with AUSD leadership in September and had our first TAC, or Technical Advisory Committee meeting, in September. And we're having our first public open house in a little more than a week. So we hope that you share the information. I'll talk about that in a second, but we look forward to seeing many of you there. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about the website, which is live, and also seeking public input. So you can see the URL at the top there. That's case sensitive, so if you're trying to access it, you'll have to make sure everything is capitalized that's up there. But you can always Google Albany Active Transportation Plan. I'll take you right there. So there's kind of 4 components of the website. We've got a piece on the goals and strategies of the plan. These are in draft form. They are not finalized. And we're looking for public input and feedback on those at the open house on the 24th. We've got maps of existing conditions. This is what we've been developing over the past couple months. An interactive map where folks can plug in what they like about the existing bike and pedestrian infrastructure and what they would like to see improved about it. And then a commuter survey, just kind of where you're coming from, how you get around Albany, et cetera. Next slide, please. So yes, the upcoming meeting next Thursday, the 24th, happening at the community center between 5:30 and 8 p.m. We hope you join. We hope you tell your friends and family and neighbors. There will be a lot of the kind of public input that we're soliciting on the website. We'll also be soliciting at the meeting, but we'll also have some other stations there that we're asking questions of the public on. And you can pull up your phone now and use the QR code to get right to the website, which provides more information about that. But we're here to not only tell you about the process and the timeline, but also promote this event because we want as many people to show up there as possible. Next slide, please. And so just in terms of next steps and action items, this phase is going to be really focused on finalizing goals and existing conditions analyses, continuing stakeholder engagement activities, hosting the open house on the 24th, And then we will present this information at the upcoming Transportation Commission meeting on the December 5th. This open house is actually taking place of this month's Transportation Commission meeting. So all the commissioners will probably be there as well. We'll present our findings at Albany City Council and seek their feedback, and then we'll be kicking off phase 2 probably in February or March. And that is, I believe, it. So yeah, opening it up to questions if anyone has any, and thanks for listening.
Yeah, one question I had for the kind of taking stake of what present conditions are. Can you talk a little bit more about the type of things you're looking at and sources you're coalescing?
Yeah, so it mostly kind of manifests itself in 4 maps. There's kind of bicyclist injuries and deaths over the past 10 years, pedestrian injuries and deaths over the past 10 years, and specific locations for those occurrences. The existing facilities map, basically where we have Class 1, Class 2, Class 3, and Class 4 bicycle lanes, where we have sidewalks or paths around the city. And then the 4th is a level of traffic stress analysis of the city, which is still very much in kind of draft mode. We conducted a more like an analysis that incorporated a methodology that we want to kind of tweak with the public's input. So there will be a station on that. The draft map is on the website, but we want to tweak that with the public input because we think the lived experience is more relevant than some sort of analysis that doesn't incorporate everyone's factors that perceived dangers, that intersections. There's a lot of things that could be added into it that we haven't just yet.
I have a question about the accident data. Does that come from Caltrans? Who provides city?
It typically comes from the University of California, Berkeley provides, initially I believe it comes from the police department, but it gets consolidated in a UC Berkeley website called, the analysis is TIMS and SWITTers, and I'm gonna have to remember what those acronyms stand for. Transportation Injury Mapping, I'll have to get back to you on that, but TIMS and SWITTers is kind of like where we get our data.
Okay, thank you. Do you know if that includes like near misses?
Because it's all kind of taken from police report typically.
Probably not.
And
Okay.
some people maybe record near misses or call the police when that happens, but there's a lot of, it's an imperfect system, but it's what we have.
Totally. I guess sort of attached to that, is that a specific sort of input you're looking for at the open house or on the website? Is like, where have you almost been hit by a car?
Yeah, I mean, the hope is that a lot of this will be duplicating a lot of the work online and in person, so the information can come to us through multiple channels. But yes, there is an online tool that's kind of getting at that question, and we'll be asking that question at the public open house as well.
Thank you.
It's the Transportation Injury Mapping System, TIMS.
Thank you. I think I got close.
Back to our chair here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have one more
Take
question.
charge.
Okay. I have one more question. What about, I know this is like not a fun question, but what about San Pablo? Like, I know that it's not ours to upgrade, but like, we get to work it into the plan somehow?
Absolutely. I think there will definitely be an opportunity to think and talk about San Pablo as part of this plan.
Thank you.
Caltrans has also changed a lot over the past 12 years, so just to note that there's, yeah.
And then I feel like from the climate perspective, we're looking at like how do we get more people out of their cars? And so can you speak a little bit to whether there were, and if so, how the planning effort is looking at like driving a mode shift for people?
We haven't gotten there yet. I think it'll be a conversation along the way. There will, in the 2012 plan, there were mode shift goals, which we've actually come fairly close to reaching over the past 12 years, which is exciting. But we'll certainly be thinking about that and touching upon that and engaging the public on that in this conversation.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, let's open it up for public comment.
Nick Peterson, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Nick Peterson with Albany Climate Action Coalition. So this is very exciting. I mean, this is a very important piece of the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. One thing I want to point out is it's not only we want to reduce the vehicle miles traveled, but we're going to densify, especially the San Pablo corridor and hopefully the Solano corridor with infill housing of a high density level, many of which will not have parking. So the idea of having a really good active transportation system and infrastructure is highly critical to those people being able to get around and keeping the increased number of vehicles off the road. I know some people, I think it would be good in bringing this to the public. I mean, a lot of people say, well, why the heck do we need to reduce vehicle miles traveled? We'll just all drive electric vehicles and we'll drive more vehicles and just keep driving and parking and everything. And I think it's important to stress that that is not a very humane environment to live in, the dangers, the lack of safety, the increased density of traffic. And even though you're not getting local emissions, you're still using a lot of energy. It's just overall healthier and better to do as much active transportation as you can, and improves the urban environment. So I think stressing those factors too, and not just that we have to drive less, is a critical aspect of this plan. I also really hope that the complete streets aspect is brought into this a little more thoroughly. We did the lower Solano area and there were some kind of critical mistakes made there. I mean, it was good for pedestrians and okay for cars and terrible for bikes. The way, trying to travel up and down Solano on bikes. And there was sort of this decision made, well, bikes will travel parallel on Washington or Marin and then cut over to Solano, which is just a terrible approach for if you're driving, riding a bike and wanting to do your business on Solano. So there was a lot of input during the complete streets for Upper Solano to include a protected uphill bike lane, which I think is highly critical. So I want to, at this early stage, just say I definitely support that. And I think having bike transportation on the primary commercial corridors is important. Thank you very much.
Clay Larson, go ahead.
Yeah, first, I want to comment on Mr. Peterson's morphing from a climate action goal to a different goal, which I would just simply say is anti-automobile. But I had some questions. The existing conditions portion of the project, will that include current bicycle counts and I guess traffic counts and pedestrian counts? That's question number one. Just get them all out. question number 2 is the meetings of the, I think you referred to as the Technical Advisory Committee. Are they subject to the Brown Act and open to the public? And then the third question, if you want to direct me to where I might look this up, am I correct in presuming that the city hired a consultant to run this climate action plan planning? And if so, what's the cost of that consultant? What was the expenditure in dollars for that? That's it. Thank you.
We're done with public.
The last commenter had a couple questions, I think, maybe one for Ben and one for either Michelle or Jeff. Did you all want to respond to those?
I can take a couple of them. We are not including bicycle or vehicle counts in our existing analysis. We have some of that data on hand for when we do various projects in the city, and it's possible that we may be.
Here again, if you wanted to mention real quick. Yeah, please continue. Sorry.
It's possible that we may use those in the future, but I think this is we're considering all data. We also want to consider latent demand data and thinking about what prevents people from using certain modes of transportation throughout the city. So it's something that we want to look at, but we also want to think about beyond the data. As I mentioned, with the level of traffic stress, data can only tell us so much about the streets. The lived experiences are going to be a lot more informative in these types of plans. In regard to the consultant cost, I believe that's public knowledge and can be looked up. We had a very open and public conversation about that at a city council meeting a few months back. I don't remember the exact number offhand, but it's out there on YouTube and for the world to see and read. And I don't have an answer on the Brown Act question.
Good evening, Jeff Bond, the Community Development Director. I can take on that third question. And I too, by the way, can't remember exactly what the contract amount was, but it was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's a substantial planning effort over a long period of time, so it is unfortunately expensive. The Technical Advisory Committee meetings are not formal public meetings that are televised or anything like that. They're working meetings with other public agencies, our neighboring cities, the agencies that will be interacting with us, the Caltrans, Alameda County Transportation Commission. There are others as well, but they're working sessions that we would do. If there are questions about it, certainly happy to talk to Mr. Larson or anyone else who wants to understand the complexities and nuances of the goals of the different agencies, but they're not intended to be public meetings like this is.
Great, thank you. Who has any comments or discussion from the committee?
Saying that I've used the online tool for the ATP comments. It's quite useful on a desktop, but not super mobile friendly. It's my main comment there, but I can add comments on areas that are easy to access or things that are challenges. So just wanted to say that I checked it out and it's pretty cool.
This is a comment / question. I've been pretty inspired by the slow streets that they have going in Oakland and San Francisco, some of which were started in the pandemic and then just kept going. So as a question, I guess I'm wondering if that's the type of thing that could, if we were to do such a thing in Albany, like on a parallel, if we have several redundant parallel streets, which we have, and we were to limit vehicle traffic on one of them to only local traffic. Is that the sort of undertaking that could fit into an active transportation plan?
Absolutely. A lot of this is going to be related to infrastructure, and I would qualify that as infrastructure. So yes, that will, if that is the will of the community, that is very possible as a component of the active transportation plan.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right.
Also concur with the commenter about San Pablo. Would love to see more active options for there, as well as Solano Avenue. So excited to see this ATP planning happening.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Ben. That was really, really helpful.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ben. Up next, we have Jeff Bond, who I think you've all met many times. So he's going to speak to us about the street tree management plan.
And I need just a moment to bring up.
Okay, great.
Amazing, it worked. Okay, again, my name is Jeff Bond. I'm the Community Development Director, and I am not an arborist, so bear with me. I can talk generally speaking and learning a lot from our consulting team, but some of your more technical questions will need to be happy to forward them on to our consultants and have them get back to you with some of those more details. So this is a progress report. We gave you a memo as part of your package that I think it's 18 pages or something, but that in itself is a summary of the first 4 chapters that our consultant is currently drafting and we're reviewing with them, and that you'll eventually see, I would hope, in the next few months. But we wanted, in the interim, we wanted to give you a notion of what we're working on and get your feedback as we work with them. The presentation I'm going to give tonight in the memo that you received is exactly the same one that the Parks, Recreation, Open Space Commission received last week. And again, the consultant was able to attend that meeting and make that presentation. So you can also just go back and watch that meeting for some of the details that they were able to cover that I might not be able to answer. With that, again, the ultimate report that you'll see is going to be 6 chapters. I'm going to touch on the first 4 today, and then probably at your next meeting or 2, depending on your agenda workload, we'll be back with more information on chapters 5 and 6. If you're anxious to hear about that, the Parks Recreation Commission will be getting that presentation, we expect, next month. So the first 4 chapters, the first 2 are the introduction and context and of the plan, a little bit of context for the city of Albany. These first 2 chapters, I don't think this committee really needs a lot of explanation for. We're doing this in large part because of the importance of the ecology of our urban forest, and it helped to achieve some of our sustainability goals and quality of life goals. This is somewhat of a focus study on street trees and managing the street trees. There's the urban forest, which is that covers the entire city, and we can talk a little bit about that, but this is very particular to the street trees because as an organization, the city is responsible to some degree currently to manage those street trees. And as a result of this study, we think we're going to be changing how we manage those street trees. So as compared to, say, private property where we don't manage the tree and care for it directly, this is something that is on city right-of-way, and thus it's really focused in on street trees, and it's really focused in on management of the trees. There we go. The other kind of big picture consideration as we're going through this is that we are looking at it throughout the city and considering different neighborhoods, and we're also looking at this with the reality that Albany is no longer a natural environment. It's a highly urbanized environment. It's one of the densest cities in the Bay Area, and so it's a bit of a struggle, frankly, to create an environment where trees will thrive. And our streets are relatively narrow compared to other cities. I grew up in Sacramento, where there's beautiful street trees in the older parts of the city at the same age as Albany, but their planting strips are 5, 6, 7 feet wide. And even other cities in the Bay Area have much more right-of-way to work with. The reason we started all this is for at least a couple of plans. Our general plan back in 2016 identified this as something we should work on, and then your climate action plan really emphasized this as well as an important program to start. And so as we try to do with any of our big picture plans, we actually we go back and look and see what we said we were going to do and going to try to go do it. So this came both from the general plan and from the climate action plan. We can talk about in perhaps a different agenda item in the future, other aspects of the city's urban forest, both on private property and on parks. We do have, and again, this is going to be a future agenda item, we have a separate planning process going on right now, particular focus on Albany Hill and the eucalyptus trees that are up there, which have a very unique and challenging situation with the constraints of the poor health of many of those trees and the wildfire risks and so forth. That's a different planning process. And then when it comes to individual city parks, we're approaching that from the perspective of the function of the park and looking and that as a normal part of our management of parks and the Parks and Open Space Master Plan that was completed a year or two ago. We're looking at the trees in that context rather than in the context of this plan. To start with, this is actually a two-phase project, and the preparation of this management plan is the second phase. The first phase was a nuts and bolts inventory of what we have. So we hired a different consulting firm called Arbor Pro to go out and individually map each city street tree. Almost 4,900 trees were mapped. They identified the species, the condition as best they could with a 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 minute assessment of each tree. They were moving pretty quickly. With 4,900 trees, they had to move pretty quickly. But at least gives us some idea of what we have, and roughly what their condition is. That information it's plugged into our graphic information system that we use every day, and there's a viewer on our webpage, so members of the public can go and take a look at individual trees if they have any questions about what they are and where they are. So the second phase was this management plan that we're right in the middle of. We hired a different consultant, that's Hort Science Bartlett Consulting. They specialize in this. They specialized in this kind of work. They have done management plans for other cities, and they've also advised the city on some particular situations over the years that we've had to deal with. So they're based in Berkeley, so they have really grounded in the East Bay and this type of work. We feel like they're a good fit for us. One of the tools that they used right off the bat is I think it's basically a software app that it's called iTree Canopy. It's developed by a couple of different professional associations, and it gives a consistent methodology to measure the tree canopy in a community. They do that by taking a series of random samples throughout the city and then really looking in detail about what is going on within that random sample. So they measure a number of different aspects of what they view on an aerial photograph. This graph shows you their conclusions about the canopy in Albany. To kind of cut to the chase, this dark green, I don't know if it reads very well with my cursor, but this relatively small dark green column is the street tree column. So it's on the table to the right, you can see it's 4% of the overall land area of the city, relatively small part. The big parts, the black area is the, which one is that? That's the impervious buildings, so homes, churches, schools, businesses, so forth. That's the black. The gray is other impervious areas, so parking lots, driveways, that kind of thing. Roadways are the third. That's the red. So that's kind of those three are the three big ones are really, we're kind of locked in with those, right, as it stands today. The areas to the left, just so to kind of complete the description of this graph, the first one is the soil bare ground. That's 12% of the city area. The second one is grass and kind of landscaped areas, and that represents 9%. So this is a good starting point for what we're working with. And the other thing that we're doing is looking at that canopy by neighborhood. And this looks first, there's two different graphs I want to show here. This first one is for the neighborhood in its entirety, and the yellow represents greater canopy cover. So the hillside area, as an example, stands out as kind of has the greatest canopy. That's because of Albany Hill. And to compare it to the next one with the street trees only, the Thousand Oaks neighborhood to the northeast has the greatest canopy, and using hillside as the comparison, it's relatively low street tree coverage in that area. And the street tree coverage is important because it helps really cool our homes and makes walking and active transportation that you were just hearing about from Ben, it makes that a little bit more comfortable if it knocks down the temperature on the street by a few degrees. So it helps us target and prioritize. This kind of information will help us target and prioritize where we start our work as we're improving the city's street tree network. Moving along, come on. There we go. This is just an inventory an image that shows the inventory of the trees that was prepared by Arbor Pro. Again, you can see, as I mentioned, we didn't inventory the trees on Albany Hill, but near Albany Hill, there are much fewer street trees in the south of Albany Hill and kind of the hillside, Gateview, Washington area of the city. And part of that reason is because the streets are much more narrow. And in some places, it's just not practical. And in some places, there aren't sidewalks also. So it's a challenging area, but we do want to start there and do the best we can with what we have. Moving along in terms of the condition of the forest, or the urban forest, street trees, I should say. This is from the Arbor Pro data. Their preliminary assessment was most trees, 56%, are in pretty good condition. 37% were what they characterized as fair, which means maybe there needs to be some trimming, but the tree is going to continue to grow and doesn't need to be removed. 6%, however, are in poor condition or dead condition, and those are trees that should really be assessed for safety, and a decision needs to be made about whether they need to be removed and replaced with a new tree that can be more successful. The other thing that the inventory gave us, gave the consultants, it was in the breakdown by species. There is a rule of thumb in the arborist profession about making sure that we have a mix of different trees in an urban area, so that not only does it kind of create an interesting variety, but it ensures that should a disease comes along that impacts a specific type of tree, the whole neighborhood, that the disease doesn't move through the whole neighborhood and destroy the whole canopy. You see some streets that have these lovely long stretches of a particular kind of tree, and to the eye that's great, but that is a very vulnerable street tree network because of the potential for disease, and also the potential that all those trees will reach the end of their life at the same time, and then there's the sudden shock of having them start to lose their limbs and die. So the one tree that we have a lot of that we probably need to be a little bit more careful about planting so many of them is the crepe myrtle. It is successful, but we probably have in some ways too many of them. It's more than 10%. The rule of thumb is 10% of one species, 20% of a particular genus, and 30%, no more than 30% of a particular family of trees. So the crepe myrtles, we have more than 10% of crepe myrtles scattered through the city, and we should probably take that into consideration as we're planting new trees. And these are some of the others that have been highlighted. Another issue that they brought to our attention, the consultants brought to our attention, is we're planting a lot of smaller trees, and part of that reason is that we have small, relatively small areas to plant a tree. We have a constrained right-of-way and not a lot of soil underneath the sidewalk in order for these trees to be successful. But the larger the tree, the more benefit we get from the street tree network, and so we want to, whenever possible, plant as large of a tree as we possibly can. There are constraints on that. We have a lot going on in our right-of-ways. It's not just the surface of the roadway, but there's infrastructure all over the place underground. There's sewer lines and storm drains and gas lines and water lines that we have to navigate between. We also have power lines above. Certain types of higher voltage power lines, it's important to keep trees out of those higher voltage lines, and then just the potential damage to the power line drops to individual homes or cable or internet lines that may be going into homes. Keep them out of the tree branches so that in a windstorm those lines aren't damaged. So again, there's a balancing act of we want bigger trees, but we need to put them in the right place. Another consideration that comes up is native trees versus non-native trees. As you can see, we generally in our current urban forest, we have mostly non-natives, largely non-natives. One of the things that our consultant has pointed out that I think is a really important point to keep into mind is, again, that the urban environment has changed dramatically. And so what was a native tree 100 years ago in a grass oak woodland like Albany used to be may not be successful in an urban environment. And also our climate is changing, as this committee knows better than anyone. And what was an environment of 100 years ago is going to be very different than the environment in 20 or 30 years when a lot of the trees that we're planting are going to be reaching their maturity. So we want to plant trees for the future environment, not for the environment we had 100 years ago. And again, one of the phrases that our consultant is using is a climate-adapted tree that will be successful into the future. I mentioned the importance of large trees. This is just a slide that makes that point. And I think that's pretty straightforward. Everybody would understand that. I thought this was an interesting slide that they showed, just the evolution of a small tree into a big tree. So this apparently, I don't know the species of this particular tree, but it's the same, it's at the moment it was planted or shortly after it was planted, and then what it can be in 30 or 40 years. So these things take time, but there's huge benefits if we make the right investment. And hopefully with this plan, we will continue to make the right investment and have more plantings. The consultants also have used this iTree technology, or the iTree application, to make some estimates of valuation of some of the benefits of street trees. I cannot speak to the methodology of this, but as you can see, the street trees do deliver some benefits in terms of pollutants removed, carbon sequestered, and absorbent stormwater to keep it from running off into storm drains as much as possible. And then, of course, storing carbon. Although the amount of carbon that we can sequester is a small slice of the amount of ultimate carbon we want to reduce generating in the community. I think we're talking about reducing our carbon generation by 50,000 metric tons or something like in that number. I think it's something in that range. And street trees maybe can be a couple thousand of those metric tons. So it's a small slice. It's important, but it's not the solution to climate change, unfortunately. And then I mentioned the importance of managing our street trees in an equitable way, and we're trying in all of our work, not just in street trees, we're trying to look at through, in addition to other considerations, the equity of our investments to different parts of the city and different populations in the city. So Chapter 4 is kind of the nuts and bolts of that will set the framework for the future chapters, and this is really looking at the management practices that we have today, how are we spending our money, and benchmarking them against other cities. And one of the important things that we realize that needs to be discussed is changing how we currently have, the current regulations we currently have on the books in the Albany. Right now, the way the municipal code is written is the owner of the property adjacent to a street tree is responsible for maintaining that tree. In practice, that's not exactly what happens. Some cases, owners are great about maintaining it. In other cases, they're not. And in some cases, because it's in the city right away, even though we may not have responsibility for maintaining it, we are liable for damage caused by a street tree. And so people call us when the tree branch falls on a car. We get the claims when there's damage or injuries as a result of a street tree. So the current municipal code standards aren't in alignment with the practical realities of our day-to-day work, and one of the things we want to do is align those better so that we have an effective municipal code is effective in establishing clearly responsibilities that both property owners and the city have. And that may involve the city taking on much more responsibility, which we're happy to discuss. It does involve more cost, and that comes back to you, the taxpayer, which you as policymakers get to tell us how far we should go with that. One of the key things that we're learning about how we manage street trees is, and how other cities do it, is the difference between a reactive system and a proactive management system. Currently, we have essentially a reactive situation where when we trim trees or we deal with damage, and after it's either after the tree clearly needs to be trimmed and pruned, and it's like, that doesn't look right, we need to come in and fix it, or after the limb falls on a car or something like that. A lot of cities have a proactive program where they go by zone and they just automatically go down a street and will trim every tree on that street just real quick, and maybe it's just a little snip here and there, not a big deal. But by getting there proactively and doing it every few years, it goes more quickly, it's more cost effective because the arborist can just stage one spot in the middle of the block, hit all the trees, put them in the chipper or whatever they need to do, and move on to the next block, and it's much more efficient. So one of the things we want to talk about, and this is really in our Public Works Department, of evolving from this reactive management style to a proactive style. It costs more, but it costs less per tree, but it overall will cost a little bit more because we're getting there a little bit. We're hitting every tree on a regular schedule. There's some tables here. I won't go through these in detail other than to point out different cities deal with this in different ways. We're not unusual in the way we do it by any means, but there are other cities that have become proactive and have been successful in doing so, and so we want to use their experiences as much as possible. We're also looking at costs of providing the services that we're providing now, and what can we do with that money in a different management style, and then what would it cost to be, kind of the most proactive and aggressive maintenance and planting scenario. Basically today, as you can see from these numbers, we're spending something in the neighborhood of $60,000 to $100,000 a year in proactive in pruning, which translates to $400 or $500 per tree. In terms of tree planting, again, this is the last couple of years. We're averaging 100 or 200 trees a year and being planted, an average of 141. Another thing that has come up frequently with our street tree program is the interaction between the street tree program and the sidewalk program. Voters in Albany have generously funded and established a mandate for us to repair our sidewalks. We're proud of that work that we're doing. Public Works Department, again, leads that, and they've done a terrific job in upgrading, improving the safety of our sidewalks. Part of the problem that we've had is the inevitable conflict between keeping the sidewalk level and safe and straight and wide enough and trees that want to grow and break up the sidewalk. The tree is trying to break up the sidewalk, basically, right? We're trying to be as careful as we can to implement the voter and council mandate to improve street trees at the same time, improve sidewalks, while at the same time preserving the health of street trees as much as possible. You can see that we're doing a lot as we go and do sidewalk projects. We're doing a lot of root pruning. We're doing rarely, but still sometimes we need to do tree removals in order to make the sidewalk functional. And then a relatively few number of cases, only 21% can we completely repair a sidewalk and not impact the tree. So that's just the challenge of small tree wells and narrow sidewalks next to each other. This gives you a few examples of the street trees that we have been needed to remove. The liquid amber, the sweet gum, or the liquid amber is the most challenging tree. Its root systems are shallow and aggressive and just lift up sidewalks very quickly. It's a nice tree, but that's one of the challenges that we've had in particular. So again, planting those in the future, we really have to be thoughtful about where we put those to make sure that we're not kind of handicapping ourselves later on. Moving along, there's some information here on the different species of trees that we're doing root prunings. Again, the liquid amber jumps out as the tree that we're having to do some pretty significant root pruning. Even if we can save the tree, it's not great to have to prune the roots. We hope the tree will survive, and many of them do, but it's something that we're having to do in order to repair the sidewalk. The other thing that we're going to be looking at in this management plan is our tree removal decision-making process. We have had sometimes the tree removals have become very contentious. We have situations where we learn that a tree is diseased and is a danger to the community. And we have a fairly lengthy process to make that decision, and we think that there are process improvements that we can make that will establish criteria on when we do that, so that there is a faster decision and more confidence in that decision. So you'll be learning more about that. So hopefully we will be using this emergency tree removal decision-making process, rarely, but when we do, there'll be confidence that we're doing it for the right reasons. And then there will continue to be situations where we have non-emergency tree removals. Some people don't like having a street tree in front of their homes, and there'll be we're going to also look at that decision-making process to the degree that this is more of a city-managed process, because remember, the way the municipal code says, it says the homeowner is responsible, property owner is responsible. If the city's taking more responsibility, does that change the property owner's ability to request a street tree removal? So we'll be looking at that process as well as the emergency removal process. And I'm not going to go all the way through this. This information is in the memo that you received and will be in the report that you'll also see. Getting towards the end here, one of the things, like every department in the city, including the department I manage, our record keeping has evolved from being pretty out to date to getting better. No one is claiming perfection here, but one of the things that we do want to do with the tree management program is to improve our tracking system and to be able to, using online systems and GIS systems, have immediate access. Everybody in the city having access to the condition of a tree, what has happened, when the maintenance was done, and so forth. Right now, that's kind of in spreadsheets that are scattered around in different servers and different folders, and they're there, but it's not easy. It's not at somebody's fingertips. So we will be looking at those systems internally as well. So as I mentioned, we're looking for any feedback you have this evening or in the future. I will certainly be happy to take your feedback to the consultants to the degree that I can't respond to them this evening. And then we'll be back with the Parks Commission in November, and back with you again when your agenda workload accommodates another visit. And then we also know that people are interested in talking about street tree protection on private property, and that too would be a separate process. It's a very different, it would be a different section of the municipal code, a different kind of decision making, probably something that's more centered in the community development department rather than the public works department, which handles most of the street tree matters. So that will be a different discussion in the near future. We can talk about when that gets scheduled as well. So thank you for bearing with an unusually long presentation. I usually try to keep these things shorter, but there's a lot here, and we didn't want you to feel like you're up to date with what's going on. These are our consultants that are working on it. Feel free to reach out to them directly or to any of us in the city, and we will loop them in on any of your comments. Thank you very much. We'll stop the sharing.
Thank you. Questions?
Hey, Jeff, thanks for the report. What's the relationship between trees and the power lines, and how much, I guess we don't need to know super detailed like percentage of intertwined, but I just noticed a lot of trees have power lines that go through them. And is that an acceptable thing? Are we going to be worrying about removing a lot of tree canopy because of power lines, and how does that work?
So there are two different power lines that are common in Albany. There are the high voltage lines, which are sometimes 4 kV lines. They're the highest line. They go from transformer to transformer. And PG&E has standards that require those stay out of tree branches. I think it's 3 feet maybe. We wouldn't want to plant a tree that's going to grow in, that we think is going to grow into one of those high voltage lines. And if we have a situation like that, we would like to trim it. We're probably going to be doing a little bit more careful job than PG&E might do, frankly, with making sure that that is done in a careful and aesthetic way. Then there are the lines that go to the lower voltage, which is essentially below, literally on the pole. coming from the transformer to your residence, and those are not required to be taken out of they can run through a tree. It's not great because trees grow and the lines can get damaged as the tree branches sway, or if a branch falls, it will cause the line to break, and obviously that's an emergency situation and a hazard to anyone that's around it. So I think it's one of probably a half a dozen factors that goes into planting, where exactly you plant a tree. And there's usually utility lines on one side of the street and not on kind of running parallel to the street. They're on one side of the street, and then the drops to each residence goes across the street perpendicular. So on this side of the street that has the high voltage lines, it might be smaller trees. The side of the street without those high voltage lines, you could have larger trees. A bit more of an answer than you really wanted, but that's the consideration that we have.
Other questions? I have about 100, so I will shorten this list. Most of these questions are about what will be Chapter 6, so TBD. You mentioned sidewalks and balancing the needs of what's under the sidewalk and the needs of the tree. I know that we've had a few modifications to sidewalks where we make a larger street tree well. So the question is, will this plan include recommendations about like how could we, while we're repairing our sidewalks, make sidewalks that accommodate trees?
As much as we can, we would do that. Every situation is a little unique, so I don't know that we can have just one standard. But I do know that our sidewalk repair program has done that in a few places with good success. So I think I would agree that should be in Chapter 6 as a recommendation and something that we look at every time we're working on a sidewalk or working on planting a tree.
Great, thank you. Okay, and then there was a good overview of sort of the pruning needs in the urban environment, but the trees also, of course, are going to need care, such as watering, possibly soil amendment. Will there be recommendations in the plan for those two things?
We've talked a lot about watering. There's no question that the first few years after a tree is planted, it needs water. For property owners that are willing and diligent about doing that, that would be awesome. And then we wouldn't have to worry about it. But if we really want to have a street tree canopy that's just really super successful, the city does need to have a more dedicated watering program, and that probably includes a water truck that we don't have and a person that we don't have, and that is going to lead to questions, how much does that cost, and is that something that we want to make a commitment to invest in? But yeah, we know that that's a big aspect of making this program successful.
Yeah, wonderful. Does the plan go or will it go into so much detail as to like give an approximate, I mean, obviously it wouldn't give a cost because it's not a service they're providing, but like a comparable cost for other cities for that kind of work? Okay, great. So in some bigger cities, and we are small, they have various, nonprofits and community organizations that also take on tree care. I guess I'm wondering if our consultants have some knowledge of and experience with that they can bring to bear when they're giving us recommendations.
Yes, they do. And bigger cities, it's, for us as a city government, we'd be happy to partner with an organization. We would need that organization to be able to make a substantial commitment over time, and to have through whether it's from the city or from some entity, the funding capacity and the liability insurance and the technical skills and so forth to do that. But to have a partnership could be terrific. But it really needs to be, I mean, one of the things we really want to do is professionalize what we do. I mean, not that we aren't, but to make sure that we have, if we're making decisions about trees, making sure that we have a professional certified arborist guiding those decisions. And so I think there are cities, large cities, that do that very well. I'm forgetting the name of the organization in San Francisco, but that's an example of one that they're terrific. So maybe there's something in our future, but I don't know of one right now in Albany, but we could get there.
I have one more question related to that, and I see Catherine's hand too. So, you mentioned that, that work done on trees by whomever would ideally kind of go through a certified arborist. Right now, in our reactive pruning regime, at least what I've seen in my own block, in my own house, is that it does not. I don't think it goes through, like the crews who are coming out to prune for utilities are not doing it, let alone in an aesthetic way, in a healthy way either. So I guess I'm also curious if the plan will, I guess, provide recommendations for how our city arborist gets involved in all this.
Yes, our vision is that our city arborist would guide and oversee people that are actually with saws in their hands and make sure that that's being in, so that he has the capacity to be there, or at least to provide guidance on a daily basis. But as it stands right now, he's a one-person operation and he's spread pretty thin, responding to all sorts of different things, and he can't be everywhere at once.
Exactly. Awesome. Thank you. Catherine?
I wanted to remind us, before we go to public comment, we have to take a 5-minute break before comments start.
Oh, yeah, that's a great idea. It's already 8:20. Okay, yeah. But does anyone have any more questions before we go to break and public comment? Okay, yeah, thank you for suggesting that. So it's 8:21. We're going to take a 5-minute break until 8:26. Thank you. And it is now time for public comment on the street tree management plan presentation.
Lucinda Young, please go ahead.
Thank you. Excellent presentation. Learned a lot. I have a few comments. First, I think there's some conflict between our desire to encourage people to plant street trees and the fact that all of the responsibility for maintaining the tree is currently put on the homeowner. Albany Climate Action Coalition did some outreach earlier this year to make homeowners and renters aware of the free street tree planting program, and I did hear feedback from people. I have to maintain it, I've got to pay. I don't think it's watering so much, but it's like paying for trimming. I have an elderly neighbor on our block. One of the street tree in her yard is the far and away most beautiful oak tree on our entire block, but it has needed trimming, and she has complained to me over and over she doesn't have the money to pay to trim it. So when people hear of this, they think, or at least some people, it can discourage people from doing the planting that we really need to encourage. So that's one concern, and I completely appreciate the high cost that the city has been paying for street tree planting, for maintaining street trees, and I understand that conflict, but I just wanted to point that out. I also, many cities, I wanted to address native trees, and many cities, unlike Albany, actually have quite a few native trees on their street tree list. This presentation recognizes that trees are really important for shade, they're very important for carbon sequestration, but there's another really important benefit that trees provide, and that is to support our struggling ecosystem. And native trees are far and away the best supporters of our biosphere. They are the support pollinators. And a lot of cities do have more street native trees on their list and actually provide, give that information, at least give that choice to homeowners. And it concerns me. It seems that Albany has sort of missed that piece. And I'd like to see more attention given to recognize for the benefit of natives. And thank you very much.
Got a caregiver here real quick, and I'll be out in a sec. Yeah. There you go. Thank you.
Nick Peterson, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Great presentation. Thank you, Jeff, for bringing us up to date on what's going on. One thing I wanted to comment that with the Climate Action Adaptation Plan, it is an urban forestry plan that it's sort of referring, but street trees, because of their proximity to a lot of pavement, are pretty critical in addressing the heat island effect. And as we get much warmer and hotter summers, which are going to continue to happen, we're well over 400 parts per million on carbon now. That having trees that shade paved areas is going to be critical. So I'm kind of wondering, is there anything in this plan that sort of prioritizes? And I think I was really happy to see how many trees we're getting in the ground, although it seems like a lot of them are sort of smaller trees. But can we prioritize, or at least look through the city and look where shading is more needed or lacking, especially from an equity point of view, and try to prioritize those areas to get in trees that will provide shade. Of course, they won't provide it for another 10 years, and by then it'll really be warm in Albany. especially during the late summer. So again, this idea of addressing the urgency of tempering, the increased heat with getting certain species of trees in the ground ASAP in areas where they're sorely lacking, that there's some sort of priority in the plan for that, and not waiting to address all that when there's a larger urban forestry plan. I think if we wait too long, we're not going to have the shade cover in these areas adequate enough when we're really frying in 10 years from now. So that would be my recommendation, that we actually do a prioritization that looks at the shading benefits and where they need to be. Thank you very much.
And David Wemmer, please go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. That was a great update, and it looks like we're continuing to move forward in a good direction with the ongoing work. I'm also with the Albany Climate Action Coalition. I'm kind of taking on a role, kind of a lead role there with the street tree program. Last, I guess late winter, early spring, our organization, we went out and put flyers on 3 or 4 of the neighborhoods, encouraging people to consider a street tree, and the deadline, for those applications, I think, was the end of February, and we got out there, and I think we made a difference. I understand there was kind of a late flurry of applications that were submitted to the city, so that was encouraging, and we look forward to continuing doing similar outreach to help people, point them in the right direction, and see if we can get more trees planted. We'd also, like to explore ways that our organization could partner with the city. You mentioned in your presentation that perhaps other cities have volunteers and organizations and such that can help the city, and we would love to explore those opportunities and use our organization to maybe help with planting, watering, maybe some pruning of younger trees, that doesn't involve ladders and things like that. But when we were passing out these flyers to citizens, and I see a lot of the young trees, and I think I'm pretty good with pruning, and I'm just looking at all these trees and I go, oh, they should be clipping this, that, and the other thing, because this is going to grow, that's going to go wrong. So we'd like to explore some of those opportunities with you. And then going back to applications for trees, we understand that the deadline now for applications has been set back to the end of this month. So us to be able to perform outreach, it's going to be a little tough given the election. So I think we'll probably do some work in November and maybe get some applications in not too soon after the new deadline, and hopefully we can help get more trees planted this coming season. And that's it. Thank you much.
There's no more public comment.
Great, thank you, commenters. Comments and discussion from the committee.
I've got about 5 comments on this. It's okay to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. First point is, as you may know, it takes about 70% native species to sustain bird populations due to the insects needed to sustain birds young. So if you want to have a healthy ecosystem in terms of not only shading the street and mitigating heat islands, but also having a healthy wildlife population, I'd like to encourage more planting of natives. one way to think about this is to include shrubs, not just trees like tan and coffeeberry that are maybe appropriate if there isn't room for a large tree or even a small tree, to encourage more native species to be included. And then secondly, on the hardscape, there's a lot of hardscape in the Albany area that has a possibility of being included for more planting area, maybe not trees, but again, more native species. So that's something that Dan Johnson at ACAC has recommended that I agree with. Third point, on the October 31st deadline, I know the goal is to plant before the rainy season, which is very important to have tree health. I've seen John Cockridge's recommendations about making sure we don't get to the dry season for planting more trees. So I'd also want to encourage the city to extend the deadline just a couple weeks, by November 15th or so perhaps, so we can encourage volunteers to be able to support the city's effort to plant more trees, because the door-to-door knocking that David Wemmer and others have done has really made a big difference in getting more people interested in the trees. But with the election coming up November 5th, volunteer time is quite limited. So for more success, to have a deadline be a little bit later, not a lot, but just a couple weeks. And then item 4, San Francisco manages watering of their street trees. I know they have a more budget than Albany does, but we do still have all these NRDD funds that have lots of opportunities to be used. That I don't know how we can leverage that or other things. And then lastly, I have done an exercise of benchmarking for cities with private property protections for trees, and have 11 pages of benchmarking analysis that I sent to Michelle Plaus. Topic it could be added for another meeting, but we really need to include private property tree protections as part of urban forestry, because trees are a great important part of this. It's great to see this analysis, but we need to consider private property as well, because we're missing out on the complete picture of our urban forest without including the private property tree protections. So I've looked at the laws in Berkeley, Oakland, Palo Alto, East Palo Alto, Hayward, San Pablo, Los Altos, and San Carlos for the guidelines for private property tree protections. And I'm happy to talk about them more in a future meeting, but want to encourage us to think more broadly about the urban forest, not only with street trees, but also with private property as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Catherine. Others have comments and discussion? I have another question about the sidewalks. You mentioned the expanding and curving out the sidewalks, like where feasible is something that the city's doing. Can you speak a little about the feasibility and where you found it not to be feasible, or what the limiting factors are?
I'll try. I'm not the engineer who has designed those systems for individual locations, but I think I understand the criteria that they're looking at. One of them is the stormwater flow in the gutter, and in many cases you can expand the tree well, and the stormwater you can align the curb in such a way that the stormwater can still flow through. But we wouldn't want to do it in situations where we're blocking that stormwater flow. Every curb has water going one direction or the other. So that's one consideration. The other is, and it's I think society is changing a little bit about this, but it's still an issue to a lot of people, is parking. And when we do those kinds of curb modifications, it often can have an impact on street parking, and that creates some people who feel very strongly about keeping their street parking. So we're prepared to navigate that, but it's still a real issue. And then there are a few streets where the street is just so narrow that we just can't do that. Again, that's sort of the Albany Hill area in particular, with Hillside and Washington, and there's just not good room. Our fire department needs at least 20 feet curb to curb in order to maneuver themselves, and that's not allowing for a car coming the other direction to get past them. So I shouldn't say 20 feet curb to curb, 20 feet parked car to parked car. So they need 20 feet clear between the parked cars. So it's a case-by-case situation. But our engineers in Public Works could come and give you some more details about that, where they've done it successfully and where they haven't been able to do it, they wanted to but haven't been able to do it. And I'll make sure to bring that back to you when we come back next time, so I can give you a better answer.
That's a really good answer. I guess a little bit related to that. So in some parts of Albany and in some other towns, we've got contiguous with the street tree wells, just a strip, like a planting strip. So when we're doing sidewalk replacement, could that strip be established on the sidewalks that don't have it and that have room for it? And could that also maybe be worked into, if we're discussing space for the trees in the tree plan, okay, they could expand, roots can expand into that if we make that space, but I don't know.
I think we have been trying to do that.
Okay.
There is a conflict between sidewalks and street trees, and one of the things that if we had all the room in the world, the federal law standard is a 4-foot wide sidewalk. We try to do a 5-foot wide sidewalk on every street if we have room. Right where the street tree is, we'll sometimes narrow it or we'll sometimes curve it into closer to the house, which we can do, although that sometimes impacts the plantings and landscaping that property owners have done. So we'll try to do that, but every situation is unique, and sometimes there are cherished plantings right on the edge there that people don't want us to touch, and it gets tough. But we can go either closer to the curb or closer to the residence or property.
Thank you. I don't remember if I asked this. And so I know we'll get some recommendations on pruning and proactive care and watering.
Mm-hmm.
Anything about soil?
I don't know.
Okay.
But I will make sure that there is either a recommendation on soil or an explanation why there won't be.
Awesome. Thank you.
And there will also be, by the way, a street tree list. I don't think I mentioned that, but
Yeah.
and including as many natives as our consultant thinks will be successful.
Thank you. Other comments?
Great.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Please.
Thank you, Jeff. I'll also note that it's now 8:45, so it might be a good time for the committee to consider extending the meeting. We have 6.1, which is options for promoting active transportation, and then we also have subcommittee updates and future agenda items.
For the zero emission transportation subcommittee, do you all have an update or presentation? Okay. Michelle, about how much time do you think the 6.1 will take?
My presentation's fairly short, probably 5 to 10 minutes, and then depending on how much discussion there is.
How does extending to 9:15 sound? Right.
Second.
Okay. Member Bierce?
Yes.
Member Fasoon?
Yes, but I believe I'm right.
That's fine. We will have a quorum, so that's okay. Member Hodges? Yes. Member Larson?
Yes.
Member Lieberman?
Yes.
Member Melgen?
Yes.
Chair Vahil McClanahan?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Just give me a moment to share my screen here. Okay. Okay, so now for the second month in a row, I'm here with a presentation about options for promoting active transportation, and some new information this time. As you might remember from last month, we spoke a bit about what the city is doing now to promote active transportation, the different roles of the Transportation Commission and the Climate Action Committee, and then what kinds of things the committee could do to promote more active transportation. Obviously, we heard quite a bit about the active transportation plan earlier today, so you guys have lots of information on the specifics of that now. We talked about some of our CAP goals, as well as some of the programs we have going on currently, including our sidewalk repair program, which Jeff touched on, Cycles of Change, which I'll discuss more in a minute, and our crossing guard program. And then we talked through a variety of options and sort of different realms of programming and funding support and types of things that the committee could do to try to advance active transportation. And the two things that the committee was most interested in, hearing more about and considering were a crosswalk flag program and then ways to promote events related to active transportation. So spend a little bit of time analyzing what those two things could look like, what the costs and benefits might be. I haven't gone into a huge amount of depth here, obviously, but this is really meant to give kind of a better look at those two things the committee was interested in, and then to go from there. So I'll start with the crosswalk flags. This is a relatively simple idea and would be a relatively simple program. The idea is basically to place flags similar to the ones you see in the picture here. There are different options. Some are reflective and different sizes. And they're essentially put in like a small bucket strapped to a pole near a crosswalk, and then pedestrians can use them to increase their visibility while crossing the street. And there's, a bucket on each side, so you can just cross and leave it there. This is a type of thing that's been tried in several cities across the country. I was doing some research on how effective it is, and to be honest, the findings were mixed and not particularly clear. There haven't been a ton of really in-depth studies on this. It does seem like they do increase the visibility of pedestrians. It's not as clear whether that improves the driver compliance, whether they're actually stopping for those pedestrians. Some studies seem to say that they do. Some studies seem to say that maybe they don't. So not super clear on that, to be honest. I also didn't see any studies that were particularly looking at their impact at night, which to me seems like maybe where it would be most useful if you have a reflective flag, because that's where visibility is really a bigger problem. Whereas maybe in the daytime it's more of a distraction issue. So I didn't really see any information on that, unfortunately, but what I do know is that, there are a lot of cities that have tried this. Quite a few of them did a pilot and then ended that program. But some of them have continued on and are still using them. So again, sort of mixed. It seems like generally the flags have a limited usage. And so some cities kind of took that and said, well, this isn't really that helpful. They're barely being used. Although it does seem like it's being used most by the people that are most vulnerable. So maybe if the goal is less to have everybody using these and more to have them available for people that really don't feel safe crossing the street, maybe small children or elderly people with disabilities, that's probably the population who are most likely to use it and most likely to find it helpful. So that's a concept, and theoretically a program could focus on very specific crosswalks where those populations are most present. One other big thing that did come up in my research was that there were major issues with theft of the flags. In particular, Berkeley tried this program, I think like 10, 15 years ago. They put out like 1,000 flags or 1,000 some really large number, and 50% were stolen within a month. So really, really significant rates of theft. The amount of theft, I'm sure, varies a lot from city to city, and, in some places it was not nearly as much of a problem, but when we talk about the costs of the program and also just the maintenance time required, that could be a significant issue potentially. Speaking of cost for this is very small compared to most of the other things we consider at this committee, which is obviously a benefit. We're talking about $100 to $200 per crosswalk just to, purchase those flags and the little baskets. Of course, if there's a lot of theft, that might be a cost every 2 or 3 months. But if there's not very much theft, then maybe that's the cost, once a year or something, or maybe even once every few years. So it could be potentially a very low cost. So that's crosswalk flags, that's the first one. And now I'll shift into events, which is a little bit more complicated. I'll just start off with the events that exist in the city right now. The biggest one we have is a program run by Cycles of Change, which is a nonprofit here in this area. And they run a Safe Routes to School program, and this is actually something that's being done throughout the county. It has a variety of components. They have bike safety classes for students. They also do challenges and prizes biker walk to school week, and they do tracking and all kinds of activities like that. And then they also do some school site coordination and kind of working on some of the more infrastructure or planning aspects of how to make that walk or bike to school easier for students as well. That's been going on for many years now, and it has been pretty successful as a program. It does sort of wax and wane a bit as parent and teacher interest changes, and so one thing we've found is that if there's a demand for it in a given year, it's really successful and really great. And if there isn't kind of a naturally occurring demand in a certain year, then it's hard for that really to have much impact. So that's kind of an interesting aspect to the program. A few other things that are going on around here. There is an Alameda County Transportation Commission program that's sponsoring biking classes all throughout the county. I didn't see any that were located in Albany in particular, but there are quite a few in Berkeley, and they're open to everyone in the county, and they're free. So that's something that has been going on for a while. And then there's also Bike to Wherever Day, which is sponsored by MTC, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. And there are quite a few community organizations, including Strollers and Rollers here in Albany, that do events and activities related to that. So that's something that happens every year. So in terms of how the committee could work on trying to promote more events or different kinds of events, there are a few different routes. The first thing which came up in the committee discussion last month was creating some kind of a grant program to essentially fund community organizations to put on different kinds of events, different types of things. This is an interesting idea, and I think cool in the idea of kind of building up our existing community organizations. There is a lot of logistical complexity that comes with it. And I think, a really extensive amount of staff time compared to a lot of the other kinds of things we do. I was talking a little bit interdepartmentally about this and just thinking what it would entail. It would require a lot of work between departments, which really increases the amount of staff time required. There'd have to be finance involvement and legal involvement and administration involvement. It would require a lot of thinking about, how do we set the rules for who's able to get grant money, and, how do we compare between different applications? And then there's a lot of financial complications, especially with smaller organizations that might not be set up to receive grants, that have a lot of legal requirements that come with them. So there's quite a few challenges that come with that idea. I think an easier and more streamlined approach, which is still similar, would be for the city to contract with a specific organization to put on events. This would be pretty similar to our Cycles of Change contract. You know, that's a nonprofit that we give them money to do a specific set of tasks and events every year. And when we're talking about one or maybe even two organizations, it's much easier for us to manage. And, you know, usually you're looking for a nonprofit or other organization in the area that has expertise in these very specific types of events or classes or whatever else. And so it takes less effort on staff's part to sort of make that run. Of course, you know, there's maybe a smaller range of possible events that come from that, sort of what's existing in the area, but it's also, again, kind of that more expertise and more of like a well-oiled machine potentially. So that's another route that we could go. And then also there's trying to build this into existing city events. For instance, you know, we have the Community Expo every year. We try to kind of fit things into that and kind of make it a place where we can spread the words, spread the messages we've been trying to spread all year round. So, you know, there could be a way to build in, for instance, you know, Berkeley has like a Ride Electric event every year at the Harvest Festival, which is actually next Saturday. I meant to put that in the announcements. But that's something they put into their existing event. You know, we could potentially try to do something similar at a Community Expo event or something like that. It still takes staff time to do that, but it's a little bit easier than trying to put on something totally new. That's another thing that, you know, if we were contracting with an outside organization, we could work with them to include a new component into an existing city event, for example. So those are some kind of ideas to think about how this could be done. And then there's also the cost and benefit calculation here, which is really difficult to do on events, unfortunately. It's so hard to estimate what the impact of an event is, I think, because a lot of times you're trying to make a change that goes with someone, you know, in a kind of incremental way much longer after the event has happened. And it's also hard to estimate the cost if we don't know exactly what we're talking about here, but for context, I just put the Cycles of Change contract, which is about $15,000 per year. You know, you heard about what the kind of programming they're doing is, so maybe that gives us sort of rough picture of what a similar type of contract might cost. I was thinking a little bit conceptually about what kind of impacts events might be able to have and where they might be beneficial. And I think what's useful for events is that they might be able to provide information that people aren't able to get elsewhere, either because they're not sort of plugged into city programs and resources, and it's like they're coming to the event for something else, and then they hear about it for the first time. Or maybe it provides them with an experience, like, you know, with the bike safety classes for kids, it's actually giving them the chance to learn how to ride a bike, right? That they're not gonna get from a brochure or something else. So I think that's maybe the largest type of benefit of events, and a sort of consideration when we think about what the impact might be of trying to do more of these is, do we think that kind of information and experiential experience is one of the major barriers we have in Albany for active transportation? You know, do we think that there are specific kinds of events that can actually help people get out there on the road on their feet or on their bikes and make that difference? And if so, what kinds of events or classes or other things might make that difference the most? And, you know, if the committee does think that there's kind of a specific need for that and can kind of brainstorm what those events or things might look like, then I think, you know, we could consider trying to find an organization to contract with to host those. So those are kind of my thoughts and analyses. it's not a full recommendation to the committee or anything, but hopefully some thoughts to chew on and help you think about where you want to go next in your discussion of how to work on this issue. And with that, I'll take questions.
The cycles of change contract, does that get reassessed or renewed every year? Does it go past a committee or anyone?
I don't think it goes through a committee every year. Jeff might know the answer to this. It might be funded through the soda tax. Maybe not.
Yes, I'm pretty sure it's funded through the soda tax. Yeah, I think so.
So in that case, there's sort of a process that goes through a few committees to decide what to spend the soda tax money on. This is like the sugar sweetened beverage tax. And there's a few programs like this, like the Crossing Guard program too, that are sort of approved every year through that process. I don't think it necessarily gets reevaluated super closely, but it has to go through that process again every year. Yeah.
And that goes in on at city council or?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. When you were analyzing the flags, did you look, I noticed there's some in Cerrito. Did you look at their program? I don't know if it's really a program. It might just be volunteers, some flags out.
Yeah, I didn't see anything for El Cerrito pop up, but I didn't look specifically.
Any other questions from the committee? All right, we'll move to public comment.
Lucinda Young, please go ahead.
Thank you, Michelle, for the information, the report. I am just thinking out loud, but I am wondering if, I'm part of the Albany Strollers and Rollers group, and several of us have observed the huge lineup of cars at Ocean View every morning. And there's been discussion about creating or exploring a walking school bus to Ocean View. And we did kind of a preliminary survey, and there are, I don't know, about 25 families 25 children or parents who are interested in having their children walk to school. I know the city supports or funds the Crossing Guard, and I'm just wondering if that might, a walking school bus may be able to get some support from the city as well. And as far as the flags, I guess what we have going for that is that it's very inexpensive. It's concerning that there have been a lot of thefts, and it's also concerning that there's not a whole lot of good data that shows it makes that much difference. On the other hand, it is inexpensive, so I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence on that as whether it would make sense for us to move forward with that. Thank you.
Ian McLeod.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I just wanted to comment about a few things. We've had this discussion about the sidewalk or the crosswalk flags at Albany Strollers and Rollers, and at least in my opinion, I don't think they're really very effective or very helpful or really worth the trouble. From my research, almost every city abandons it after a fairly short amount of time because of one, theft, or just the displacement of the flags, not necessarily theft, but they get moved. And, you know, somebody's got to be very actively retrieving flags that get dropped on the sidewalks, rebalancing from one side of the street to the other. It's like a every 2 or 3 day thing, you know. So it's really not effective, and it's of marginal benefit to pedestrians anyway. I think, you know, the better option is increasing, you know, better infrastructure, better crosswalk infrastructure, and getting cars to slow down. You know, there's really no substitute for getting people on bikes and walking except for better infrastructure. I think that's the main thing. I mean, these events are great. For a while, there was a bike around town event sponsored by Parks and Recs once a month, I think, during the, not during the winter, but maybe 9 months of the year. And it was, you know, they had swag they gave away, and it was led by volunteers. There were probably 20, 30 participants per time, and it was usually kids with their parents, so that was a good thing. I really support the Cycles of Change program. I think getting kids more educated and comfortable on their bikes is like a really key important thing to promote. And in fact, anything that promotes kids getting to school safely on their bikes and by foot is something that the community really should support. Safe routes to school, like Lucinda mentioned, walking school bus. There are also biking school buses that can be created that are getting more and more popular all over the country. You know, so I would really, you know, say bike education is important, work with the schools on all of that. But really the most important thing, and you've heard it with the ATP, is creating protected bike infrastructure. That's the key. You don't get mode shift without infrastructure change. And the events are great. You know, I'd also mention the Move and Groove events and the Albany Try for getting community members out and active and involved. The Move and Groove one is more informal, more fun. And I think they have a lot of families with kids that participate. Just getting people out there and moving and excited about biking, I think, is great. So I would also, you know, have you consider supporting those events, which the city has been doing. Okay, thank you very much. Good evening.
And Nick Peterson.
Yeah, Nick Peterson with Albany Climate Action Coalition. Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts on this too. Some of them mirror what Ian McLeod just mentioned. First, to talk about the crosswalk flags, I think it's a horrible idea. I saw it fail in Berkeley. Flags would end up on one side on the ground. And just the sight of pedestrians huddled behind a little waving flag as if declaring, you know, surrender to the cars. It's just, it's not appropriate infrastructure for people's life safety. And we should compromise the cars. It seems like if we have a crosswalk location where you need more protection to pedestrians, it's not being offered by just having the painted crosswalk and the pedestrian right-of-way laws, then there should be at least the button with the flashing lights, like they have, you know, at Curtis and Marin. But just giving these little flags, I think that's a complete failure of recognizing how to protect pedestrians. So I vote a big no on that. The events idea, I think just doing sort of one-off events, the idea is to promote a lot of regularity and habit. I think that, you know, something should happen between Albany Unified School District and the city to try to promote rewards for individual achievement in walking and biking to school, and also group achievements, like actually pay groups of families to get their kids together in either a bike bus or a walking bus, and to do it consistently day after day so it becomes habit. And there could be awards like, you know, individuals could win bikes, or you could get $100, or, you know, there'd be, I mean, I think by the time you add it all up, maybe it'd be a few $1,000s, but it'd be way better than just having one event and then it's over, and are they gonna ever do it again? So I think putting some carrots in there to really encourage people, or even discourage people. I mean, maybe, if people arrive too many times in a car, they get cited or something. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I almost get sick when I see the lineup at Ocean View and at Marin where everybody wants to drop their kid off right at the front door. And it's just shouldn't be happening in Albany. The other thought I had was along the line of events is maybe there could be a mall Solano where monthly in June, July, and August, from Masonic down to San Pablo, they would shut the street down and turn the whole of San Pablo into a mall and work with the businesses on that. Just an idea, 3 times a year.
No more public comment.
We are very close to our time. Can I move that we extended 9:25?
Second.
Member Bierce?
Yes.
Member Hodges?
Yes.
Member Larson?
Yes, but I don't really want to extend beyond that.
Member Lieberman?
Yes.
Member Melgen?
Yes.
Member Chair Vahill McClanahan?
Yes. Any comments or discussion on this item?
Michelle's main question in the memo was experiences or information is the question. And I'd like to encourage us to think about experiences as motivating behavior change. People may not find brochures or website pages to be the only way that they make changes, but having the chance to experience something makes a difference. For me, at least, I thought e-bikes were like a nice idea, but then I tried one at the Harvest Festival last year, and I'm like, wow, these are fun. I enjoy this. So having that felt experience of trying an e-bike in person made me buy an e-bike. So that's my vote on experiences in terms of events.
I'll chime in on one of my personal experiences as well, as far as the flags versus other ways of signage on the crosswalks. And I happen to live on Curtis near Marin, and I love that blinking crosswalk thing. And I don't know how many of them there are, but it feels to me like spending a little bit more on infrastructure, like Ian was talking about, that's solid, acknowledged, visible, would be a better idea. I'd rather spend more money on a few more of those than the flag idea. I mean, the flags, that seems like a okay idea, but I mean, the data seems like most cities don't really stay with it. But I'm just imagining if there was more of those, flashing crosswalks, drivers, pedestrians would get more used to acknowledging that as a legitimate, enforceable thing. Because I feel like the one on I don't know how many are in, but it feels like I'm always a little tentative. It's like, do people really know that this is a thing? So, but it seemed to work. I mean, more often than not, cars stop. So I'd rather see more money spent on a few more of those than trying to do, super low budget, something like flags.
I support some of the comments from public comment. Generally, we're, not supportive of the flag program. I agree that, people use the flags because they feel unsafe. People are only going to walk or bike if they feel safe. And so really, I think the way to get people to actively transport themselves is through infrastructure and not through education or window dressing like a flag program. I do like the idea of the safe routes to schools. I think it's important to get kids informed about how to bike safely and walk safely and all of those things. But I think that programs like, I liked Nick Peterson's Mall Solano. I'm a big advocate of closing Solano Avenue as much as possible. I know that might be somewhat unrealistic, but I think that the proposal to close it 3 times a year for pedestrian and bicycle purposes as a sort of Sunday streets or whatever, that sort of thing as a pilot would probably go a long way. I think people would then feel safe and get out and be more active and get around and do their shopping or whatever that way. But generally, I have a somewhat pessimistic view on the educational side of this. I have worked in a job that was trying to get people to like commute more, and the numbers improved as infrastructure improved. And I think that's the way to get people biking and walking, is to make it safer for them.
Yeah, I also want to appreciate the comments that were made around, I think this was Nick who commented, that it's something we do programmatically and routinely rather than a one-off is a good thing, and that a partnership with schools is a great thing. In response to Lucinda's comment about the walking school bus, I walk with the walking school bus every day to Cornell, or several times a week. And our lead organizer has many times reached out to other parents to offer to help them organize one. And for, one for coming from the other direction to our school, but also folks interested from other schools. And I'm thinking maybe it has not come together yet just because the parents that I know are very, very busy. And so I appreciate what Lucinda was saying about the idea of maybe the city supporting that in some way. I would say that the way that would be the most helpful would be with organizing. We have found on our bus, there are actually a lot of parents who are willing to do the walking with the students, and it's just the simple matter of like getting everybody onto a single WhatsApp group or something like that. So the organizing piece is, I think, what's missing. I mean, if there's 25 families interested in Ocean View, but they haven't already just started walking together, I think that's where help is needed, I guess. Yeah, that's all. Oh, just to say, I am also excited about the idea of like a Sunday Streets type thing. And I would love to see that as a proof of concept to merchants. I feel like a lot of the pushback that I've seen in Albany so far against making things more bike and pedestrian accessible is from the Merchants Association. And I think if everyone on the Sunday Streets is actually like shopping at the businesses, perhaps there would be a proof of concept there and win some allies.
Yeah, those are particularly interesting to me, the ideas of the slow streets or the walking, and it seems also like one that could be prone to getting lost between groups. Like if Public Works is more, or the Transportation Committee is more focused on infrastructure, we're focused more on, say, events here, it could be hard to like everyone to coordinate to do those two. So I don't know what the means are to push that forward, but I think that could be the flip side of really cool collaboration.
Yeah, connected to that, so you talked about sort of like, thank you for this analysis, by the way, this is really helpful. You talked about reflecting on which events would drive behavior change. As we come up with ideas for that, does it make more sense to serve them off as one-off event ideas that come to this committee, or does it make more sense to come back to the question later and try to address it programmatically? Like, we have concluded that these sorts of events would be helpful. I guess I don't know who would sort of own events.
Yeah, I think it depends on the kind of route the committee would want to go. If the committee is still interested in trying to contract with a specific organization for events, then it would kind of, you'd be like, okay, well, what events do we want to do? What are we looking for in order to create that proposal? I think, I'm hearing a lot of interest in this, shutting down Solano idea. I know that's something that's come up in the past, but, that's something that theoretically isn't so much contracting. That's maybe more like working with the Solano Avenue Association or something. I don't know exactly what that would look like or if it's possible, but I could look into that a bit and see what see what that would take, because yeah, that's like a little bit of a different approach. And then yeah, just, you know, this is a little bit off topic, but you know, another thought, the point about infrastructure being essential has come up quite a bit, and that's something that's very, very clear to all of us as staff as well, that like that is the thing that makes the biggest difference. And you know, as Ben spoke about earlier tonight, we're very actively working on that, and so I think the real challenge with it is that it's just not really something within the Climate Action Committee purview, because it is so technical and really more of a transportation commission and consulting type of thing. But you know, if the committee feeling is like infrastructure is where it's at, that's what we should focus on, and the Transportation Commission and our active transportation plan are doing a great job of that, we don't really need to get involved, that's also fine. Like, if the committee feels like all this other stuff is not really gonna help that much, and we should just let them do the infrastructure stuff, like, that's a totally okay answer. But if the committee feels like there is some other stuff programmatically or whatever else that can be helpful, there is a space for it too.
Notice we're almost out of time, so in terms of like a takeaway, it sounds like it's like, let's just think about it.
Yeah, and I can spend some time trying to learn about the shutting down Solano concept as well, because that seemed popular. But yeah, we can all marinate on it more. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so we don't have any subcommittee updates, so it's time to solicit future agenda items in brief. So if anyone could please share their agenda items very quickly, then we'll end just about on time. Going first, for you to go to public first. Yeah.
Oh, the public first?
Yeah.
How much time would you like to give each member of the public?
I'm gonna do like 30 seconds because we had a request from Eric to finish on time.
Yeah.
Very, very quick agenda.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Lucinda Young.
Yes, this has been discussed at previous meetings, but I would support further exploration of a tree ordinance on private property, which committee member Bierce mentioned earlier. She has done some extensive preliminary work on that. And also I'm looking forward to hearing more about the enforcement or the administration and enforcement of the new foodware ordinance, or outreach, maybe I should say, rather than enforcement. I know there's not going to be any enforcement for a year, but I'd just like to hear what the plans are for getting the word out to restaurants and the public. Thank you.
Ian McLeod.
Hi, just very briefly, I'm on the Planning and Zoning Commission, but speaking on my own behalf. But basically ideas about green building standards, and I don't know if you've been doing anything about that, but I think it'd be good to collaborate on creating more meaningful standards for green building than we have now. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
No more public comment.
Thank you. And from the committee? Dan?
I'm hoping we can receive a presentation from the person at City of Alameda who manages their curbside EV charging program.
I'm just seconding what Lucinda mentioned about the research on discussing private property tree protections.
Any more suggestions? Okay, we're only 1 minute late. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. We're adjourning at 9:26.
And our next meeting will be November 20th.